Welcome back to another video on the Matt Talks Ball channel. Sadly, not at a good time. Manchester City are on the back of two defeats in the Premier League. Of course, the season got off to a cracking start. 4-0 victory against Wolves at Molineux. And then what happened? We lost to Spurs. And then you think, well, it can't get any worse, can it? To quote Mick McCarthy, it can. We lost to Brighton, go 1-0 up. Truly a game of two halves. You know, the first half we were looking pretty good. Not our best. And I think Brighton weren't looking very good either. So I think that probably made it easier for City. Obviously, Haaland gets the opener after missing two or three really good chances. You could argue he probably should have got a hat-trick in that game with the amount of really good opportunities he had in front of goal. You know, you think of the one where he goes through and just passes it to Verbruggen. Like, you know, you'd expect Haaland to just whack it into the top corner, but that didn't happen. And yeah, the win didn't come for City. Of course, James Milner scores the penalty. Of course, it's James Milner, ex-City, ex-Liverpool, very disliked by City fans because of when he moved to Liverpool, of course. There were then comments about moving to a bigger club, finally at a big club or something. I can't quite remember what it was, but I don't like him. We don't like him. And of course, he scored. And then, of course, from there on in, Brighton were in control. City looked numb, frightened, lack of ideas completely. And it was really, really bad, to be honest with you. You know, how good we were, especially against Wolves, to contrast to that second half against Brighton and the game against Spurs. It's really worrying and really reminiscent of last season, the dark times of last season, that is. If City and Pep Guardiola want to get back on track post international break, there are three things for me that need to improve, need to be addressed for us to get back on track, chasing down Arsenal and Liverpool, and hopefully being serious contenders for this year's Premier League, because so far we look miles off it. Now, for me, one of my biggest concerns for City going into this season was the right back spot. Of course, we were linked to Tino Livramento and Wesley for pretty much the whole summer. Wesley ended up at Roma, was probably not the best option anyway because he's not very proven. He's played literally one season in Brazil. We know the reasons. Livramento, obviously the ideal option for City, could have cost us 100 million, maybe more. City decided the deal wasn't worth pursuing, probably wasn't going to happen. So yeah, we're right backless, if you will. And at the moment, it's Mateus Nunes and Rico Lewis that occupy that spot. Of course, both have very different strengths, very different weaknesses. You put them together, you've probably got a half decent right back, probably a very good right back. Actually, that'd be unfair to say half good. I think that you add all their attributes. You've got Rico Lewis's on ball, his tactical nous, knowing when to go in, go out. And his defensive work isn't too bad either. His positioning is really good. Mateus Nunes, you've got an athlete there. You've got a bigger guy. You've got a guy who can get up and down the pitch, can create in forward areas. You know, he's really good at hugging the touchline and getting a quick cross in or something. You add them together, you've got a really good right back. Anyway, City haven't got one. And yesterday it was evidently clear that Mateus Nunes is a real weakness in our side. You know, not just as a right back, but as a player. I know that sounds very harsh, but his decision making for that handball was absolutely shocking. If a ball's coming over to you in the box, why on earth would you put your arms up in the air? These players know the rules. Don't get me wrong, like some of them are very petty, these rules. They really are. But if your hands are above your head and you're surprised why it's given as a handball in the penalty area, I think you need to give your head a wobble because seriously, it was such a blatant penalty and such a blatant penalty and such an avoidable one as well. And of course, City, it goes 1-1 and City's heads drop, which is another problem. Point being, at right back, it's a real concern for me. Of course, we saw Rico Lewis's limitations against Spurs as well. However, one huge positive for me yesterday was the performance of Abdikadir Kusanov at centre half, obviously. Now, a lot of people have called for him to be played at right back, mainly due to his recovery speed and actually his performance at the Bernabeu last year. If you cast your mind back, of course, it was in our terrible spell of form. We did lose the playoff in the Champions League. We did get knocked out, but Kusanov did really well against Vinicius Junior. And this was probably maybe in his first 5 or 6 games. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it was in his first spell of games coming in the winter, and he did really well. He really impressed me. Like I said, he really impressed me yesterday. I thought in what was a very disjointed City performance, him and I'd say James Trafford as well, who made some incredible saves, were real positives to take from the game. Everyone else, I probably can't really say. I can't really give them flying colours like them too. So for me, something that needs to change, I think Abdikadir Kusanov needs to be utilised at right back. I think we've obviously got Ryan Aït-Nouri at left wing back, left back, whatever you want to call it, who is bombing on now. We saw him against Brighton bombing on. He had a very difficult afternoon defensively, but when he did go forward, he did create a couple of good opportunities. And I think obviously long term, we're going to be using him more as our attacking option at full back than Matheus Nunes on the right, if you know what I mean. So with that said, you can have Aït-Nouri bombing on, and then in like a back three almost, it could be Kusanov, Stones, Gvardiol, or Ruben Diaz in there, Nathan Ake in there, whatever. And I think that's something that we really need to see. Like I say, the recovery pace, his timing of a tackle, his defensive nous, knowing where to be, his positioning, something that's really, really come on. I was really impressed with him yesterday, his positioning in general. And in the short time he's been at City, he's really come on. Obviously his debut, he had a shocker against Chelsea. We all know that, but I think he's really began to turn a corner. I think, to be fair, he turned a corner last season. After that performance against Chelsea, he kind of put it to one side, played really well, and then for some reason was just out of the team for a couple of months. There was obviously that clause that was going around on Twitter that people were spinning round, that apparently if he played so many appearances for City that we would have had to pay an additional 10 million to Lons, who we bought him off. I don't know how true that is, but in that spell, he barely played for City. But now he's back in the team, seems to be ahead of Akanji, seems to be ahead of Ake as well in the pecking order. Obviously, came to the side. Ruben Diaz was dropped ahead of the Brighton game. And yeah, I was impressed with his performance, and I would like to see him at right back. Another problem for me against Brighton and against Spurs was a lack of control and cohesion in the midfield. Of course, it looked so good against Wolves. The balance was there. We had Bernardo, we had Nico, we had Reinders. It looked perfect. Then, of course, Cherki comes in against Tottenham. A little bit gung-ho, left us a little bit exposed in the middle. But then Rodri came in against Brighton, and you think, okay, here we are. And to be fair, Rodri did have a very good first half at the very least. Pretty good game as well, considering the lack of football he's had in the last 12 months. Rodri was very, very good. Now, I would like to see Rodri in a double pivot with Nico Gonzalez. Now, on the face of it, you could think that's quite negative, Matt. Like you've got two out-and-out holding midfielders there. Well, I disagree. Both players have shown during their time at City that they can really offer something going forward, especially Rodri. We know, not last season, season before, he picked up quite a few goals as well, if you remember, on the way to getting his Ballon d'Or, of course. Nico Gonzalez, I'd say, alongside Trafford, has probably been our most impressive performer so far this season. Of course, he didn't play against Brighton, but against Spurs, he was pretty good, and Wolves, he was very, very, very good. And he's had a couple of months now to bed into the team, understand the guys around him, understand the way we play, understand Guardiola understanding him. And I would like to see Nico and Rodri alongside each other. And I think it would give us a lot of defensive assurance that we are lacking at the moment, especially on the counter. There was an image I saw on Twitter that, on the counter attack for Brighton's second goal, we were just wide open. There was absolutely no one there. Everyone was getting pulled from pillar to post. It was an absolute mess. So I think let's get the basics right. For one, defensively in midfield, Rodri and Nico, I think that'd be very solid, very physical as well. And I think it would also allow Tijjani Reinders to get further forward. Obviously, his debut against Wolves, incredible. Playing quite an advanced role. A lot of people were saying in the Kevin De Bruyne role. A lot of people were saying we've replaced Kevin De Bruyne. Kevin De Bruyne who? I wasn't one of them, but I was seeing a lot of people saying that. Now, if we allow Reinders to get further forward, not only does it make up for the injury of Cherki, who's obviously out for 2 months, makes up for the lack of Foden. Obviously, he's injured at the moment. There's no telling when he's going to be back. Obviously, I would love to have a prime Phil Foden right in that team, but I think right now, I think a midfield of Nico, Rodri, and Reinders. Reinders obviously being more of a 10, I think would give City defensive assurance and some really good creative ability. And of course, he's got that nous for that box crashing runs, and I think he'd pick up a lot of goals along the way playing in that position. And I just think it's something City should try. Now, for me, the third and final thing that City must improve on, must change before their next game, once the international break is out the way, is their creativity. I know it sounds so easy to say from the outside looking in, but the creativity just hasn't been good enough. After the 60th minute against Brighton, City only managed 2 shots. None of them were on target. That is really, really bad. Of course, you can say we're without Cherky, we're without Foden, but the other players need to be stepping up. Bernardo Silva, where were you? Where were you yesterday? You know, Reinders as well. I know he's only just come through the door and he's bedding in, but, you know, where was he? Where was he? Doku comes on, created nothing, absolutely nothing. Even Oscar Bob, who I'm a huge fan of, had a very, very quiet game. An okay game, like he didn't make any mistakes or anything, but he took very little risks as well, which is a worrying sign. Ryan Aït-Nouri created a little bit down the left flank in the first half, I alluded to earlier in the video. But overall, it was pretty bleak, and it was a lot of City waiting for Brighton to make a mistake or hoping for an opening. And yeah, and even then, you think in the first half, Haaland runs through, didn't even take his chance. So what good is that? Anyway, on the face of it, creativity needs to improve. How is that going to happen? Well, obviously the first name you think of is Phil Foden, the heir to City's creative brain that obviously was Kevin De Bruyne. A lot of people are backing him to have a very big season on the back of what was a very disappointing one last season. And I'm someone that definitely believes that he can do that. I think it's safe to say Phil Foden is one of City's most creative players, most threatening players on his day. You know, you think back to not last season, the season before, PFA Player of the Year, unbelievable. If he can get anywhere near them levels, City could be laughing, could be absolutely laughing. And another player that I think would make a serious difference to City's creativity is Savinho. Now, Savinho's been at the centre of a massive transfer saga this summer. Spurs hunting him down. He's been tempted. City were thinking, okay, maybe if we get this, we'll go for Rodrigo, which obviously would have been a really cool signing, to be fair. But if you think about it, Savinho got the most assists for City last season in his first season. And he's what, 20, 21 years old when he first joined City. Now he's got a year under his belt, a bit more understanding, got used to the Premier League. But he's still on paper like got the most assists for City last season, which I think a lot of people don't realise, like how important he was and how well he actually did in what was such a dysfunctional side, a dysfunctional attack as well. And sometimes he was asked to play on the right, the left, you know, everywhere at times. And he still managed to thrive. And I think, you know, I'm not saying that we're definitely a more stable team right now because the last 2 results suggest that not much has changed from last season. However, I do believe that if he gets back in the team, Foden gets back in the team, I do think numbers are only going to go up. And I would be interested to see Savinho play on the left. Now, Marmoush has been occupying that, who, by the way, I think has looked really good. And strangely enough, I think against Spurs and against Brighton, when Pep has brought Marmoush off around the 60th, 70th minute mark, City's threat going forward really, really just went downhill. So I wonder if maybe you could see Savinho on the left, Marmoush behind Haaland, and then Bob on the right or something. I would really be interested to see as well. I know a lot of people have called for this. Doku on the right, Savinho on the left, like Sane and Sterling. Right foot on the right, left foot on the left. I think that's a really straightforward way to create chances, especially for Haaland in the box. So I'd like to see that. Savinho as well, it's worth noting, his best season to date, the season before he joined City for Girona, he got some ridiculous numbers, completely playing on the left-hand side, and his crossing ability is fantastic. And that's something when he's playing on the right, we don't really get to see. So I think that could be a solution. But of course, he's got to be reintegrated into the side because by the sounds of it, he did want to go to Spurs. So we'll see how long that takes. But hopefully, Savinho and Foden can get back into the side in the coming weeks and add a bit of creative flair that we're missing. Let me know what you think about these possible suggestions. Don't get me wrong, I'm not pretending that I know more than Pep Guardiola, but I just would like to see, as a fan, these things just tried out. They might not work, but I think all of them make sense. Savinho on the left, Nico and Rodri as a double pivot, and Kusanov at right back. They're all things I would absolutely love to see. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Comment down below if I've had an absolute stinker with some of these ideas. And please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.